All right, everyone, we have found the miracle diet, the diet that's going to completely 100% change your life and transform your body. Joe, I don't know if that's a lie. I don't know if it's true, but we're about to dive into something called the animal diet. Yeah. You're listening to the Be Real podcast with your hosts, Bobby Maximus and Joe Cebula. And like everything we do, we're going to get right down to business. So, Joe, tell me a little bit about this miracle diet that's going to change your life.
Well, it's called the animal diet or the animal-based diet. And the guidelines of it are pretty simple. You're eating animal products. And so that can include, any kind of meat. That can also include things like dairy. It also allows for some fruit and some starches in there. So it's not exactly a carnivore diet, but that's kind of the gist of it. If it comes from an animal, it's okay. It's allowed.
Okay, so basically what I'm hearing is we can have organ meat, we can have steak, we can have eggs, we can have dairy, raw or pasteurized, or does that matter?
I don't personally think it matters, but the guidelines on this diet tend to push towards raw dairy as much as possible.
Okay, so something that's more natural, which is something you and I talk about all the time. Like one of the analogies that I always use is if you had a brand new Ferrari, if you had a brand new McLaren, if you bought an F1 car, would you fill it with diesel fuel? Would you fill it with junk? And the answer is absolutely not. If you have a high-performance sports machine, a high-performance driving machine, you would want to use the best oil, you'd want to use the best gas, you'd want to use the best fuel, and your body's no different. So one of the reasons, Joe, I'm going to say this animal diet works is because if you buy into this, and what I'm hearing is meat, eggs, raw dairy, and a little bit of fruit, you're getting rid of everything processed. Is that about right?
I think that's where the miracleness of this diet lies.
Okay.
And honestly, it makes it a little bit more palatable than something like the carnivore diet, which is like nothing but meat. That can get really hard after a while. And that ain't for everyone.
Okay, so let's go over this point by point. Number one, It's meat-based. Now, why is it meat-based? Because meat is nature's perfect vitamin. It's nature's multivitamin. Like you can live off meat alone. Yeah. It would be really hard to live a healthy life off plants alone. Despite what the vegans are going to tell you, an entirely plant-based diet is going to leave you deficient in a lot of areas. And it's why vegans that do it properly rely on heavy supplementation. Yeah. So with meat, you can get everything you need. Like when you eat an egg has everything in it that you need to survive. So if you're eating steak, if you're eating a high quality fish, not tuna from a can, but a tuna steak, you're eating a salmon steak, you're eating some chicken, you're eating some eggs, you're getting all the things you need, all the vitamins, all the minerals, all the healthy fats to make your body run well. And if you buy into the meat thing, provided you're not eating at Chick-fil-A, provided you're not eating at Subway, provided you're not eating at McDonald's, you're pretty much eating a diet that's free of processed food. So it's not necessarily magic, but if you're getting rid of all the processed garbage, you're going to be doing pretty good.
Yeah, and like you mentioned, you need variety and ideally wild caught as much as possible. Because we know what happens with like farm raised beef versus grass fed, right? Like wild caught salmon has a different nutrient profile than farmed salmon. But the real, magic to being on a meat based diet is exactly that. It's nutrient dense and calorie light. Like when you're going with lean cuts, it's hard to get enough calories. If all you're eating is like lean steaks, like strip steaks all day long, you're just going to be low calorie. And it's going to fill you up because it's a very high protein diet as well. So nutrient density, I think, is the real key phrase to keep in mind when it comes to any diet that's very meat-based. You mentioned vegans struggle to get an entire nutrient profile. It is an art form. There's a lot to learn about which plants you need to consume and how to combine them to get complete proteins. And that's just a piece of cake if you're on a meat-based diet.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to talk about one more point that you mentioned briefly, like when you talk about wild caught. The less antibiotics, the less hormones, the less poison in you, the better. So that's the number one thing with this diet. Number two, you're allowed to have a little bit of what I call fun. You're allowed a little bit of fruit. You're allowed some honey. You're allowed some maple syrup. You're allowed some agave, which the carnivore diet can be a little unpalatable for people, because if you're just eating, it sounds great at face value. I'm going to have a ribeye for breakfast, a ribeye for lunch, a ribeye for dinner. But it gets really hard to eat like that. And especially if you're a social creature, it sucks when you go out and food comes to the table and you're really just allowed your meat. It helps to have a little bit of variety. So with the fruit, with the sweeteners, natural sweeteners, of course. And Joe, you were looking at an article. Some versions of the animal diet also allow you to have sweet potatoes, rice in limited quantities. They don't want you eating buckets of this stuff. But in limited quantities, if you can have some rice and some sweet potato, it's a lot more palatable and a lot more easy to follow long term.
Yeah, and one of the concepts that we come back to a lot when we talk about different diets and different diet strategies is whether you need to be low carb or not. So if you're going on a carnivore diet, guess what? You're keto. You are very, very low carb, because there's just no carbs if all you're eating is meat. This diet is not necessarily a low carb diet. Like, you can have your fruit, you can have your rice. And so depending on your needs as an athlete, as, you know, a human being, you can dial that up or down. So being on this diet could be very keto if that's what you need to be, but you also have a lot of room to turn that dial up and get a good amount of carbs in there.
Well, and let's be honest, sugar's good, Joe.
It's tasty.
The analogy I want to give you is a toddler, or actually a baby is the more appropriate term, but a baby the first time they try a strawberry. Like, they are in heaven. It is nature's candy. Like, they absolutely love it. But something happens as adults, because we have so much processed sugar, that strawberry tastes less good. It becomes less sweet. It's less vibrant. I have people do a sugar cleanse for 30 days, Joe, to get rid of all that what we call sugar addiction, and their taste buds reset. I think they reset every 14 days. But then the first time they have a strawberry, they get that baby first time berry feel where they're absolutely in heaven. And that can be something that just makes you really happy. It's hard to follow a diet when you're miserable, especially you said something today on the phone earlier that I want to share with our listeners, but you talked about, like, most guys, they're not trying to get completely shredded. It's not, their marriage isn't dependent on it. Their paycheck isn't dependent on it. You don't want to be miserable. You want to enjoy yourself a little bit. So this animal diet can be a little more palatable. And that brings me to point 3, Joe. At the start of this podcast, I said we found the miracle diet. We found the thing that was going to change your life. Here's the deal, though. The reason this works, and we said it before, but I really want to drive this point home. I'll say it again. You're just getting rid of the processed food. Like, do I have a problem with seeds? What's the old CrossFit diet? Meat, nuts, seeds,
meat and
berries.
vegetables, nuts and seeds.
Right.
Some starch.
It's not going to hurt you.
And no sugar.
Yeah, there's no magic to this. It's not going to hurt you to have a little bit of arugula. It's not going to hurt you to have a little bit of spinach. It's not going to hurt you to have some fruit. It's not going to hurt you to have some sweet potatoes. If you want some peanut butter. Now, I don't want you having Skippy peanut butter that's got all kinds of canola oil in it. I don't want you having flavored peanut butter that's got all kinds of natural flavors. But if you want a scoop of peanut butter, if you want some coffee, if you want some real, genuine 100% dark chocolate, like, Joe, that's not going to kill you. So you can also do what we talk about, the 90-10 diet, where if you were 90% animal and then 10% of the time you were allowed to have some walnuts or some cashews or macadamia nuts, or you were allowed to have some, some cane sugar, like something like that, you would be doing really, really good.
Yeah. And I mean, let's face it, if you're 90%, you're following this very strictly, you're eating quality meats, quality ingredients, and that 10% is where you're having, I'd throw it out there, like an ice cream cone. The ice cream cone isn't going to be the thing that's making you fat at that point, because it's just not that impactful. And even when we break this down as not being a miracle, it comes back to something that you and I have talked about for years and years and years, is that just cutting out all this processed food is really the key to getting where you want to be on this stuff. because processing more than anything just strips nutrients out of food. The more cycles of a process it goes through, the less nutrients it's going to have in it, the more of it you're going to need to eat in order to like feel full or to feel like you got anything of it. So when you cut all of that stuff out, when you're choosing, Paul Saldino, the guy who is the father of this diet, he did a whole thing on sourdough bread versus regular bread. Like ideally, I mean, bread's not the greatest thing that you can have, but a good sourdough has what, 3-4 ingredients?
Yep.
And so it's just a better choice. And if that is the amount of effort that you're putting into everything you eat, even the things that aren't technically on the diet, you're just going to be in a better place.
We get a sourdough from the farmer's market. It literally has 2 ingredients. It's wheat and water. And that's it, Joe. And then, you put a little bit of salt on it at home. You put a little bit of butter or ghee on it. You put a little bit of olive oil, and it is fine. But now that we're talking about this isn't going to work, Joe.
No.
90-10, don't eat processed food. You're not going to follow that. You know why? Because you need a thing. You need the carnivore diet. You need the animal diet. You need the keto diet. You need the zone diet. You need the Atkins diet. Like people really just want a thing to buy into. And for a lot of these people, Joe, it becomes their religion. And you don't think that's true? Go talk to a carnivore. Go talk to a vegan. Go talk to and they are so dialed with their thing. And that's also why the animal diet can work for people, because it gives them something to hang their hat on. It gives them something to talk about at the office. It gives them something that's boring when you just say, Bobby Maximus, why do you look like you do at 46? Like, are you on TRT? Nope. Are you on PEDs? Nope. Then what's the secret? I just eat healthy. Conversation is over. Nobody wants to hear that. And everybody knows how to eat healthy. But if I say, hey, I'm going to tell you a secret, but you can't repeat this. It's because I'm on the animal diet. People are like, the animal diet? What's that?
Apple cider vinegar.
You're selling it. It's just a gimmick, a hook. Now,
well, I'll tell you what. Let's let our viewers. We'll give them an option if they really want a T-shirt that says "I follow the Eat Healthy Diet." They can comment, and we will figure it out. Maybe we'll come up with some cool slogan. We can all wear a cool hat. So we all know that we're on the Eat Healthy Bobby Maximus diet.
That's not going to sell. What's going to sell is Animal Diet FTW.
There you go.
It's bad. It's edgy. But no, Joe, seriously, on a serious note, people find it easier to follow something when they buy in. I'm going to reference one more thing. It's a program I'm actually a fan of, 75 Hard.
Yeah.
So 75 Hard, it's a guy, Andy Frisella, that came up with it from First Farm. And when I first heard of this diet, or not this diet, this work program, this exercise program, this psychological challenge, like whatever you want to call it, I was like, I've been doing 75 Hard for 30 years. Like I've literally worked out 2 to 3 times a day. I read every day. I drink my water. I follow a semblance of a diet. I'm like, this is just a lifestyle for me. But if you tell people they have to live a healthy lifestyle, you got to work out every day. You got to go for a walk. You should read more books. People won't follow it. You call it 75 Hard. You give it a hook. You give it a gimmick. You put a book behind it. Now it's a thing that people want to buy into. It's the same thing with these, from your world, the 30-day paleo challenges that CrossFit gyms used to do, right? Like if it's a 30-day challenge, you'll buy in. If it's just eat healthy for 30 days, you're not going to. So it gives people something
we've
to follow.
decided. I think we've decided we're going to write a diet book. So everyone stand by for that.
That's it. Stand by. So animal diet. I mean, I'm going to give it, Joe. We're going to do a rating thing. Siskel and Ebert. I'm going to give it 2 thumbs up. You're getting rid of processed food. You got a little bit of variety, and it's going to fuel all your athletic needs. So, like, I'm okay for it. I'm just not ready to say it's the miracle thing that's going to change your life. Just ditch all the processed food. Ditch all the garbage. And I'll sign off with this, Joe. You watching this? You know what's healthy and what's not. You know what you should be eating and what you shouldn't be eating. Just do it. Have some discipline, some self-respect, some motivation, and you'll be just fine.